The provisional agenda for this meeting is the maintenance of peace and security in Ukraine. I invite the representatives of the United States, Russia, and Ukraine to participate in this meeting. Colleagues, since the beginning of this full-scale Russian invasion, the prospects of peace remain desperately dim. The impact of intensifying violence on civilians remains our greatest concern in that thousands of civilians' deaths and casualties have been recorded in the Ukraine. I now give the floor to those representatives who wish to make their statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. I have just stood with my colleague representatives to denounce Russia and Iran for blatantly violating Resolution 2022 and 31 of the United Nations Security Council. We are aware of the Kremlin's current collaboration with Iran to develop weapons within Russia, and we are aware that the Kremlin has recently utilized these weapons to frighten and kill civilians while destroying infrastructure in Ukraine. The United Nations needs to move quickly for Ukraine. This is a life or death situation. Due to Russia's ruthless and unrelenting attacks, millions of homes in Ukraine are now empty and filled with endless pity. Russia is seemingly prohibiting the United Nations from supplying aid to residents in the flooded areas. As we speak, that must change immediately. Why President Putin ought to be so determined on subduing a foreign country, whereas the Ukrainian people will never seek their sovereignty, their democracy, or their independence. Russian attacks have turned the entire Ukrainian cities into rebel strongholds. Throughout peace in Ukraine, based on the most fundamental principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inherent right to self-defense has been supported by more than 140 nations in several votes. If we were in Ukraine's shoes, every representative in this room would demand for the same thing. And of course, peace calls for the cooperation of all parties. The Ukrainian people will suffer more if President Putin's cruel war of aggression continues. Thus, there must be a unifying call for him to seize it. Russia for a long time prevented Ukrainian grain from leaving the Black Sea. This prevented Ukrainian grain from feeding large portions of the world, particularly in Africa and the Middle East. Because of this, the Black Sea Grain Initiative is a crucial agreement that we must continue for everyone's benefit starting next month. And for this reason, it's extremely concerning that Russia is once again the lone nation threatening to lead the effort. We must continue to hold Russia accountable for its crime against the Ukrainian people and continue to urge Russia to put down its weapons and embrace diplomacy. We must also shine a bright light on member states that disregard Security Council resolutions. We must never allow the abuse of force to remove international boundaries to be an option. We must continue to support the Ukrainian people and reject the United Nations Charter as well as international peace and security. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Russia.
Thank you, Madam President. Firstly, we want to clarify that the goal of our military operation is not to destroy the Ukraine. Our use of force against Ukraine is lawful under the Article 51 of the UN Charter, which preserves the rights of UN member states to defend themselves against an armed attack and to engage in collective self-defense. We use force against Ukraine in order to defend the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic, who for years now have been facing humiliation and genocide perpetrated by Kyiv regime. Ukraine is targeting and killing Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine, where Russian-backed rebel separatists have been fighting the Ukrainian government since 2014. Since the conflict in Donbas region began 8 years ago, more than 13,000 people have been killed, including over 3,000 civilians. Many more have been injured, with 1.5 million people displaced. Furthermore, the US allies, without any sanction from the UN Security Council, carried out a bloody military operation against Belgrade using aircraft and missiles right in every center of Europe. We have to remind these facts, otherwise some Western colleagues do not like to remember those events. And when we talk about it, they prefer to point not to the norms of international law, but to the circumstances that they interpret as they see fit. Then there came the turn of Iraq, Libya, Syria, the illegitimate use of military force against Libya, the perversion of all decision of the UN Security Council on Libyan issues led to the tragedy, which doomed hundreds of thousands, millions of people, not only in Libya, but throughout this region, gave rise to the massive migration from North Africa and the Middle East to Europe. A similar fate was prepared for Syria, the fighting of the Western coalition on territory of this country without the consent of Syrian government, and the sanction of the UN Security Council is nothing but aggression and intervention. Again, we want to say that the purpose of a military operation is not to destroy the Ukraine. If Russia stops hostilities, the Ukraine will continue genocide and killing our people. If Ukraine stops hostilities, it will save many lives, and Russia stands ready to negotiate for peace. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Russia for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam President. Firstly, I would like to point out the consequences and loss caused by Russian troops. In the last 600 days, 9,000 civilians have been killed, including 500 children, 17,000 have been injured, and the amount of war crimes committed by Russian troops totaled over 108,000. Why is Russia doing this? Some may ask. Well, since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia has had the deep-seated grudge against independent Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and many other Russians believe that Russia and Ukraine are one nation and that Ukraine is an essential part of historical Russia, a chunk of the empire that is being attempted to rebuild. But over time, Ukraine had chosen a different path, one of democratic expansion, reform, and European integration. Ukraine made the choice to look forward rather than allow the past to reclaim its attention. Sadly, Russia started employing force in 2014, annexing Crimea and focusing on the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk while refusing to comprehend or respect Ukraine's choice. The full-scale invasion started on February 24, 2022. Russian forces crossed the border into Ukraine in order to take more territory, undermine Ukrainian identity, and liberate democracy itself. As NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg stated, President Putin has attacked an entire innocent country and people with military force to achieve his political goals. What he is really doing is challenging the world order we believe in, where all countries, large and small, can choose their own path. He does not accept the sovereignty of other countries. In light of this, European nations, particularly with those with ties to Russia past and present, have started to fear for their security. Budgets for defense are increasing, and this trend is likely to be observed around the world. Money will be allocated to constructing military systems, even in nations that would rather focus on improving their educational systems or combating climate change. Additionally, the war poses additional risk to the environment. The cost of the environmental harm brought on by Russian invasions of Ukraine alone is projected to be $36 billion. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that the globe as a whole is affected by this war, not just Ukraine. The nuclear danger is yet another security risk that emerged in the 20th century. Vladimir Putin is announcing to the world that he is prepared to use all means, including nuclear weapons, anytime circumstances don't go the way Russia wants them to. And even so, that is only a small portion of Russian nuclear fear. Nuclear contamination has no regards for boundaries, despite the fact that Ukraine is a major target here. Also, Food shortage is now a reality in many nations, but nuclear catastrophe is still a concern. Many Ukrainian fields are still seized or not accessible for harvesting as a result of the conflict, which also interrupted supply routes and sealed Ukrainian ports for months. Ukraine supplied food for over 400 million people globally before the full-scale Russian invasion, and as a result of Russia using food as a weapon to create a worldwide threat, hundreds of thousands of individuals may now experience food shortage or perhaps famine conditions in Africa and Asia. And Ukraine must fight back in order to stop this conflict. For the independence of Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian language, and the Ukrainian culture that Russia is attempting to eradicate. For both the country's future and the future of the entire planet, since current events will serve as a model for other nations across the world. We must work together to put a stop to this meaningless war, which only exists to further Putin's political goal. We must unify as Ukraine, a country bound by rich history and an unwavering spirit, and stay firm in our commitment. It's our duty to safeguard both the future of our people and our independence. By banding together to create conditions conducive to long-term peace, stability, and prosperity for all Ukrainians, we can overcome the challenge faced in our path. That's all I'd like to say for now. Thank you, Madam President.